Hey everybody, it's Ray from Moss Pawn & Gun and Iraq Veteran 8888 again. I just wanted to get with you guys on this project right here. It's the M46 Swedish Mauser. It's in 9mm by 57, and it's a pretty cool unit. They made quite a few of them. They're real high quality guns. Eric wanted me to go over fitting a recoil pad on this one because the one that's on here has been done pretty badly. It's got some improperly shaped points on it, and it's a little bit on the proud side. So we're going to take this one off, fit a new one. We got some Kickies pads here. We picked these up from Brownells, and although they're out of the package flat, we're going to show you how to make these fit with the contoured butt plate, butt assembly on this rifle. It's not particularly complicated, but takes a few minutes to do. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to use a little fixture here that's very neat. This uses your disc sander. You put the J-hook in this orientation on your bed plate, and then this right triangle hooks to your swivel. Once you get your pad attached to this, you use this to actually grind the pad against your disc. What the right triangle does is allows you to match up your drop and your stock angle. So when you get ready to fit your pad, the first thing you're going to do is take your right triangle and loosen the screw here where you can move it back and forth and change that. You're going to lay this up until you take the top bar even with your cheek weld all the way across. If it's a Monte Carlo, just pick the straightest line on the Monte Carlo so that it'll match up. And then you set this up flush against the back of the stock. Being that this stock has a little bit of curve to it, we're just going to go from the top edge down and just give it a good guesstimate there. But once you get it to that point, you lock your screw down. Your pad's already on here, and the one thing that we're going to do is go through and show you how to scribe the pad and fit that perfectly. And you'll never have to get even close to your stock with the sandpaper. Not at all. So there's no chance of damaging your gun stock whatsoever. The finest piece of woodwork can be done this way, and you'll never have to worry about damaging it. All right, we've got the original recoil pad off of the gun. This is an old Pachmayr accordion style that was pretty ill fitted. It was probably done by hand, of course. The toe was kind of bull-nosed off, which kind of makes it look crappy, and otherwise was a little proud. It wasn't fitted very well at all. So we're going to ditch this thing for something a little bit more in tune with modern day looks on these rifles. We've got a Kickies pad that we're going to do a few things to make it fit up nice and correctly. The stock itself has a minor amount of curvature to it, and we're going to use some heat to form the base of the pad. And with this, when we heat it up, this stuff has some memory to it, so we're going to have to overbend it and let it relax a few times to see where we're at, because we don't want it to leave a gap like this one had underneath it, because that looks even worse than the fitting of the pad in my opinion. So we're going to get this thing pulled down real good and tight, and once the screws pull it down, it'll actually put a little tension in the center of the pad when the screws are pulled down. And so when you were to lay it against the stock, when we have it, it's going to be a little bit overbent, but that's fine. It'll relax into place. And we're going to get that set up. The nice thing is the screw holes match up, so we don't have to do any filling and re-drilling. This particular pad already has the holes cut from the factory. Some pads don't, and the simple way to fix that is to either come in from the back with a plug punch, or you can carefully use a standard straight punch like so to lift the rubber and just touch it with a razor blade with an X, and it'll cut through that simply and won't show up real bad at all. So now we're going to set this up on our right triangle. Again, I've already set this up for the angle that we're looking for. Basically the top bar along the top line of the stock, and the back plate here. We're going to reset it a little bit. I've got to go ahead and put the pad on the stock first to get a scribe line for it. So first I've got to bend it, then we're going to put it on the stock, get our scribe line, transfer it over to the right triangle, and then take it over to the grinder and grind away everything that's not the recoil pad for this gun. All right, so we got the stock put in the vise here so it's a little bit easier to work with. I'm going to start heating this up and checking the contour a little bit. So I'm just going to use propane, and just going to hold it with my hands, because if it gets too hot it's going to scorch, and if it gets that hot I'm going to burn my hands first. So heat her up. To help this set a little bit faster off screen here, I've got a paper towel that's been soaked down with water. I'm going to set this on it for a moment while I've got it bent, and that'll help it set a little bit quickly. All right. You can see it's already starting to hold some of its curvature there. Put a little bit of light behind it to see if you got any light coming through there. And actually, it's kind of already got where I want it to be. If you can see, there's a little bit of light at the top, and now at the bottom when I rock it back and forth. When we pull the screws down, it's going to pull it from the center to each end, and that should be enough to keep there from being any light gap there. So I'm going to go ahead and put some screws in this and pull it down, and then we're going to scribe the pad. A little bit of lubricant in the pad for the screws will keep them from tearing the rubber. All right. When you're doing a recoil pad, you do need to be sure that you get one that's fairly close to the size of the stock that you're going to work with. Depending on the manufacturer, some of them will have steel inserts inside, some won't, just depending on the particular model and the brand. This one is all plastic, so you can trim down pretty close to the screws if you have to, but just to cut down on the extra labor, there's no real need to buy a pad that is so much bigger than what you're working with. So this, you got a good even amount of material top and bottom and on both sides, so that shows me that it's fairly centered up to begin with from the other pad. At least they did that part pretty well. So once you got your pad pulled down tight where it's not moving, you can check for light gaps again, and not quite pulled down there at the bottom yet. There we go. Just felt that pull up. All right, so once we got the pad on the gun stock down firmly and all the gaps taken away that we don't want, we're going to take a scribe, just a nice sharp scribe like this, and we're going to go along the perimeter of the stock, and we're going to leave a light scribe line in the actual pad. So just carefully go along there. Don't press too hard because you don't want to damage your wood or scratch your finish on the stock. But just make sure your scribe is nice and sharp, and you won't have to do any of that. Just a real light trace line is all you need. Something else you can do if you need to actually see it a little better, you can spray it with some dye chem, or you can mark it with a Sharpie, and that'll give you a little bit better visual reference. So once you get that done, that's really the last time you're going to have to touch the gun, other than to take the pad off before you actually put the finished product back on the gun. going to pop this back off and we're going to transfer it over to the triangle jig, and we'll take it over to the grinder and fit it. We've got the right triangle fixture piece here, and we've got the screws for that already installed in the pad. So we're just going to push those on through and thread this down onto the fixture. And there's very little to it more than that. So the fixture comes with a couple of different size shoes, so if you have different screw spacings, you can actually adjust that or change the actual mounting plate here. This one's got, I think, 3 different points of adjustment on it. Those of you that know me know that I am not afraid of power tools. I'm not going to pull that down totally tight because we don't want to pull our bend back out of it. So right now I'm just going to leave a little bit of a gap in it, and that'll be fine. It's still very rigid. I'm going to set that back on the stock and get our angle back that we need, and we're going to go over to the grinder. If you look closely, I believe, looking at the lighting here, we can see our scribe line. So when we take this over to the grinder, what we're going to do is we're going to actually take all that down and remove the line. Once you remove the line, you've got exactly the same size as the stock. Don't leave any line, but don't go over the line either. You're going to have to be real careful when you're doing this. That's why I said that sometimes if you want a little bit easier to see, you can use die chem or a marker. And one other trick I'm going to show you real quick. Take a piece of chalk or soapstone and you can go across your lines too. And they'll fill in, and you can wipe them away and you can see your line a bit better. So that helps it show up a little bit more. So we're going to take this out to the grinder and I'll show you how that works. All right, now we've got this pad set up in our right triangle device with the fixture overarm. So this fixture overarm is, I've got a little hole drilled through my table on my disc sander here. You can do this on a wide belt sander if you want to. The disc sander is very handy. I just use it a lot. Make sure that your table is 90 degrees to your wheel. Square it up real good, lock it down good and tight. The J-arm has a swivel so that you can move this pad any orientation you want. When you set this up, make sure that the J-hook itself is pretty much in line with the surface of your wheel. If you tilt it out or in, you're going to change the angle that the pad meets the actual wheel. So basically just bring your J-arm over until the pad just touches the wheel, maybe slightly more than that. If you go pronounced inward, what's going to happen is you're going to have a pad that's going to flare from the wood outwards. You've probably seen some of the, I think Richards and a few others used to do some old California style that had a big flared butt pad on there, and that's how they did that. You can also tip it outwards this way if you need to cut a little bit of a radius on the top of a pad for shouldering field shotguns, if you want to do a little bit of a radius like that and have some control over it. But for now, we're just going to set this up center line with the pad just barely touching and no angle in or out on our triangle, and we're going to tighten it up. All right, the disc wheel needs to be fairly coarse. We're running about a 60. You can get away with an 80. You can get down to 40, but you got to be careful because it takes material away really quick. If you go too fine, what's going to happen is the wheel's going to not cut. It's just going to want to burn. So the bigger the diameter of the wheel, the better it's going to cut, the faster it's going to cut. And the same thing with the coarseness. Stay in the 60 grit range. Some of the pad manufacturers will actually suggest what they like to use for their finish on their pads so that you don't tear the material. But just take it easy, go lightly, don't put too much pressure on it, and everything will go good. I'm going to go ahead and turn this on and start, and we're going to start on the two ends first to get away with most of the material on those, and then work the sides down and disappear the line. You can see the material comes away relatively quickly with the coarse wheel. Something you don't want to do is stay in one place because it will cause the pad to overheat. If you can't touch it, you're holding it in the same place for too long. So just keep your hands on it, and if it feels hot, stop for a moment, let it cool off, or have some water handy that you can dip the pad assembly in. If your wheel starts to load up, grab yourself a wheel cleaning stick and hit it a couple of times, but generally it won't with the plastic and the rubber, as long as you don't get it hot. So we're going to continue on with this. Thing wobbling a little bit. Let me reset that. There we go. All right, we've gotten this taken down to the point where the line has just disappeared. So for all intents and purposes, this pad is fitted to final size. There's nothing else that needs to be done with it. The one thing that you might want to do, depending on the cosmetics that you're looking for, if you want to take a little bit finer piece of paper to the sanding marks on the pad, you can. But once you lubricate this a little bit with a little bit of finishing oil, a lot of that stuff that looks noticeable now will not be. So other than that, you can see that it's a very nice shaped and finished pad, and really all we have to do is go back to the gun and install it. It's good to go. All right, we're just going to go ahead and pull the pad off of our fixture because we're done with this now. It served its purpose for the job at hand. So let's pop this off of here. All right, so if you've got any feather edges or anything of that nature left that you don't like, just get you some a little piece of 240 here, and you can I just wrap it around my finger and just knock the edges off a little bit. You don't want to take the edges off too much because it won't look crisp on the wood, but if there are any feathers, anything of that nature that you don't like, just knock them off there. Every once in a while, depending on how sharp the tip is, when you grind one like this, it might leave a little bit of feathering. Again, you can just hit it with the sandpaper a little bit like that, and it'll come off. The biggest thing for a nice, consistent looking fit so that there's not a slope on one side and a high side on the other is to make certain that your holes are square, right in the middle of the stock. If you're not sure, then lay the stock out and divide the stock and lay out a center line on your stock. Fairly straightforward. Just measure the width at the widest point and two other points and divide that using a set of calipers or divider, and just make yourself a good center line before you put your pad in place. There's some instances where you can't do that, but very few. For the most part, you can get away with doing that, even if you have to go back and fill the holes and start over and put new holes. It's a lot better. Guns that are heavy recoilers or super high-end shotguns and such, I'll also put 2 blind dowel pins in the pad. So I'll go ahead and drill those into the stock. I've got transfer points that I put into the stock to mark my pad, and then I'll drill my pad, and I usually use 1/4-inch hard steel or stainless steel dowels so that these things don't move around at all. With the screws, if you hit one of these hard enough, it'll displace itself a little bit unless you glue it down. Some guys like to glue them down. I like to dowel them. That way you can take them off and on, especially if it's a stock that has a retaining bolt going through the stock to hold it to the action. You want to be able to access that if you have to do maintenance on the gun. So doweling is my preferred way to do that. I've glued them on. We do leather pads and wraps as well. So pretty much any format we can do those. But this one, fairly simple. I'm going to put a little bit of lube on here to let you guys see what this is going to look like in the finished process here. A little bit of ballistol on a towel, and she cleans right up. All right, we're going to reinstall this pad, and if I did my stuff right, which I'm pretty confident I did, should fit up real nice. Again, when you're putting the screws in, just make sure you use a little bit of lubricant on your screws, the driver shaft, keep the rubber from sticking to your screwdriver, and go. I'd say it looks a lot better. As good as a factory fit, just about. The only better way to fit the stock and the pad is to grind the two together as a unit, if you're going to be refinishing the wood or if you're starting with the new stock. Besides that, this is about the best way you're going to get it done. And there's no extra fitting, no extra grinding, as smooth as it can be, no light gaps behind it, and it should stay that way. The only reason I would do anything other than the way it's set now is if it was a real heavy recoiler, or if I knew it was going to be under some severe conditions, I would maybe glue it down or put some dowels in there. Besides that, good to go. I'm going to take this one out and have some fun with it.